All right, so at the end of the last video, I was getting ready to finish off this flat color version, which is always the first step to doing more complicated digital coloring. And what I did is I made a duplicate of my line art, and then I moved that duplicate down underneath my flatting layer. I'm going to keep it as a vector, and then I'm going to double click on it to open up my layer styles. And we've done this before with our vector projects. I'm going to make an offset. An offset will help it show up on any background, because right now all my black lines are disappearing into the black background. So if I want a clean offset, I do a stroke, and then I change the stroke's color to white, like perfect white in that upper left-hand corner, and then I make it on the outside, and then I play with the size. And there you go. I get a stroke. And that stroke is a little annoying because it shows me I have two tiny dots I didn't know about in my vector, because it's doing a stroke around them. But I could clean those up. So that is my flat color. So how would I turn it in? What I would do is turn off the color reference, turn off the black background, turn off the white background, and turn off the gray background. And unfortunately, if I were to print this or give this to a vendor or put it on a t-shirt, I would get these two stupid dots just because my vector has that in it. So how can I fix that? I could go to my EPS file. Let's find it in my folder. So once you do an offset, sometimes it will show you like stray things. And I'm going to drag that, or I'm not going to drag it. I'm going to open up that EPS file with Adobe Illustrator. And I'm going to find those marks, which are so bizarre. So they're up here. There they are, these two tiny dots. And then I just hit delete. And then I save, Command S. And I could resave it as an AI file, resave it as an SVG file, but right now I'm using the EPS. That's what matters. So I'm going to drag that EPS back in, and then I'm going to shrink it, holding down Option until it fits. And I wish it would snap perfectly, but I don't think I'm going to be that lucky. And then I just turn off the other one, right? Replace it here, up at the top, lock it, unlock this one, delete this one, mark this as gray, and then I'm going to do the offset again. So I'll turn it off here. I'll have the black background on. How do I do an offset? I duplicate my black line layer, the black bread. I don't rasterize it, but I bring it underneath my flatting layer, and then I double click it to open up layer styles. And if I want a hard-edged offset, which I do, I use a stroke and I set it to be white on the outside at whatever size I think is most helpful. And I think that size is pretty good because you still get these interesting like negative shapes, maybe just a tiny bit bigger. So we're working at a pretty high resolution here. If you make it too big, it kind of washes everything out. If you make it too skinny, actually skinny kind of works well for this. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that. Then you hit OK, and then you're going to lock that. But before you lock it, rename it Offset, so you know what the function of that layer is. Okay, now I turn off all the backgrounds. I'm going to save this, Command S, and then I'm going to save it as an online format that I can turn in. Now you'll notice how without the black, this looks really washed out, right? That's why it's nice to have it on these different backgrounds. Because on white, it can look kind of washed out. But this is just the beginning. But this is finished, one type of finished coloring. So I save it as a PNG with no background showing. So I'm going to save it as a copy to the desktop as a PNG. That's going to be my online file format. Here it is. I mark it orange. And then I also need something else to turn in, which is just the clean vector line art. So in the Photoshop, I turn off all the color and I turn off the offset, and I just have the vector showing with no background, and I save that as a PNG, but a different name. So save a copy, PNG, so it's free floating line art, and this is going to be my assignment 5 line art, online format onto the desktop to turn in. So there's 3 things required for assignment 5, which is due next class. So I'll also mark that as orange. You need your sketch, you need your refined vector line art, which you have to do as a smart object out of Photoshop because it has to be rasterized in order to go into Canvas, right? And then you need a full color solution. So I've already posted my clean vector art, but I just went over how you did that. And now I'm going to post my flat color. Now you might color yours in ways that aren't just flat color, but I'm just showing you something that's acceptable. And then we are ready for duotone and cell shading, other types of digital coloring. So this requirement is your full color spot illustration. And I want everyone to have some sort of offset. So that it can show up on different backgrounds. And you're going to have the option of making this a t-shirt for yourself. Something you can give away as gifts at the holidays. Or you can even make public and sell it if you feel good about your copyright. Kermitzilla is... It's on the line, though, copyright-wise. So this might be like an internal gift. But I can make an argument. I don't know. Don't we all pay for public media in a way? But the Muppets, they're all owned by like the Sesame Street Workshop, so they're not public domain.
Mainly they're owned by Disney, right?
Yeah, so if they're owned by anyone, they're not public domain, right? Because you can sell, who owns the distribution rights. So that's my full color. Now, if I look at my inspirations, this one is all finished in flat color, right? But this one looks epic. And that's because this is duotone hard edge color, right, from animation. And then this is a photograph, but you can see how it's more soft edge tones in there. So that's what we're going to be learning how to do next. And that's what I'll do at the beginning of next class. And if you want previews of any of that, look at the exhaustive introduction to digital coloring, and you'll see what happens next. So duotone is when you split that local color into highlights and shadows, either with hard edges or with soft edges. That's what this looks like. That's what this looks like. It's really good for limited color. This would be flat color. This would be with hard edge duotone. And there's different ways we can do it. And then soft edge duotone can look really, really realistic if you want it to. Like really modeled. And then hard edge duotone is what we see in animation. It's what's called cell shading. And then sometimes you'll do hard edge duotone and then you'll get rid of the line art, as you see here. But it's still digital coloring because it was all colored behind those lines. So here's some animation that uses it, the duotone. And this is where we'll pick up next class. And then from there, we go to full spectrum color. And from there, we go to special effects and color holds, things that go on top of the sandwich. Like an olive with a toothpick in it. That's what color holds are, to make that golden lasso glow. Or to make highlights in her full bleed hair. Or just to do different effects, like this. So right now in the process, we are right here. Took a lot of work, but we got to our flat local color with my demo. So this is where we can push it next, and then, and then, and then, and then, and eventually to color separation. All right. Good work. So The second thing on our agenda is we wanted to check in on our group presentations. So I'm going to pause the video